My name is Ethan Walker, 37 years old, and I never thought I'd be the kind of man who would even consider invading his wife's privacy. But when your reality starts to crack in small, almost imperceptible ways, when silence replaces conversation and excuses become a daily ritual, you begin to question everything. And sometimes questioning leads you down a road you can never come back from. Melissa and I had been married for 10 years. We met at a 4th of July barbecue, where she laughed at one of my lame dad jokes before I even got the punchline out. That laugh used to be my favorite sound in the world. It's strange how love can quietly become distance, how the things you once adored begin to feel unfamiliar. I work on an offshore oil rig. It's grueling work. 14-hour shifts, weeks away from home, but it paid well enough that Melissa never had to worry. We had a simple house outside Corpus Christi, Texas. Melissa was a freelance graphic designer, working from home, and I trusted her completely. I used to brag about how solid we were. A decade of marriage and still strong, or so I thought. It started small. She began going out more often, saying she had to meet clients or catch up with friends. I didn't think much of it at first. She was always a social person, and I was gone often. But then it became routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, without fail, she'd be out late. Girls' night, she'd call it, flashing that smile I used to know by heart. But it didn't reach her eyes anymore. I started coming home to silence. No lights on, no dinner, no Melissa. I tried not to make it a big deal. I'd convinced myself she deserved her space. But denial is just comfort dressed in cowardice. Then came the receipt. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was cleaning out her car. She had asked me to rotate her tires and check the fluids before her supposed trip to her sister S house next weekend. I bent over the passenger seat, brushing away some old parking passes and gum wrappers, when something fluttered out and landed on the driveway. It was a receipt. From the Oceanside Hotel, dated 3 weeks ago. 2 nights, room service, wine for 2. I stared at it like it was written in another language. My heartbeat quickened. Melissa had told me she was visiting her sister in Houston that weekend. That receipt said otherwise. I walked back into the house slowly, clutching the receipt like it was a live grenade. I felt like I had stepped into an alternate timeline, one where nothing made sense. I waited until she came home. She acted normal, kissed me on the cheek, told me she was tired. I said nothing. Not yet. Instead, I called Noah, my best friend since high school. He's a cybersecurity analyst, and probably the only person I trust more than myself. "I think Melissa's hiding something," I said, pacing in the garage with the receipt still in my hand. "I need to know the truth, man. And I need your help." "You sure about this?" Noah asked, his voice low and serious. "Once we go down this path, there's no undoing it." I was already nodding before he finished. "I'm sure." The next day, while Melissa was out getting groceries, Noah came over with his laptop. He showed me how to discreetly clone her phone, how to set up spyware that would mirror her texts, calls, and photos directly to my own device. I hated every second of it, but the truth doesn't come gently. That night I watched as her phone lit up, a flurry of messages from a contact saved as Brian G. The first few were harmless: dinner plans, jokes, a YouTube video about dogs wearing hats. But then I saw the photo. A mirror selfie. Melissa in lingerie I had never seen before, blowing a kiss at the camera. Followed by a message. "Missing you already, babe. Can't wait for our weekend in Austin." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My ears rang, my hands shook. I stared at the screen for minutes, unable to move, unable to breathe. This wasn't some random flirtation. This was real, intimate, planned, and I had no idea how long it had been going on. I could have confronted her right then, but I didn't. I needed more. I needed the whole picture. And somewhere deep down I was still praying that there was some explanation, some reason beyond the obvious. But my gut already knew. My wife was cheating on me, and I was about to go deeper into a truth that would tear my life apart. I barely slept that night. I kept scrolling, rereading Melissa's messages to Brian G., a man I had never heard of, a name she had never mentioned, and yet she spoke to him like he was her whole world, affectionate, flirty, comfortable, like she didn't even have to hide who she was with him. It was a version of her I hadn't seen in years, And that hurt more than the messages themselves. The next morning I dropped her off at her yoga class, then parked a few blocks away and opened the spy dashboard on my phone. Within minutes, I saw Brian's full contact info, synced from her phone. Brian Grant. Email bgrant@uninetcorp.com. That sounded familiar. I searched Uninetcorp on Google. It was a private defense tech firm, known for AI drone surveillance systems and government contracts. Headquarters, right in Austin. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Melissa had mentioned Austin to Brian in the messages last night. Was this the same Brian? Was she involved with someone connected to government defense work? The more I dug, the more I learned. Brian Grant wasn't just a mid-level tech guy. He was the executive director of partnerships at Uninet, frequently in the media, often giving TED-style talks on privacy tech. The kind of guy whose LinkedIn photo looked like it belonged on the cover of GQ. Square jaw, expensive smile, that nauseating air of invincibility. And my wife had sent him lingerie selfies. I felt sick. I needed to know how deep this went. I called Noah again. This guy's a big deal, I told him. She's not just having an affair. She's tied to something bigger. This company's working on government surveillance. What if she's helping him with something off the books? Noah was silent for a moment. You think she's being used? Or is she part of something? I don't know, I said, but I want to find out. We set up a full data capture on Melissa's phone. Not just messages, screenshots, emails, location tracking, audio recordings if the mic caught keywords. If she so much as whispered Brian near her phone, we'd know. And that's when it got worse. That same afternoon I got a notification. Audio flagged from Melissa's phone, recorded just an hour ago. I played it. It was her voice, hushed but excited. Noah's almost done setting up the mirror server. Once that's running, you'll have remote access to the whole client database. I dropped the phone. Noah? Was she talking about my Noah? My best friend? I scrambled back through her texts. Nothing recent with him. Her tone sounded too technical for someone like her. Unless the Noah she mentioned wasn't my Noah, but some tech guy working with Brian. Still, a mirror server? A client database? Melissa was a freelance graphic designer, not a systems engineer. Or was she? My blood turned cold. Suddenly I realized I didn't know her at all. I thought she was just unfaithful. But what if she was complicit in something illegal? What if she had lied to everyone, me, her family, even Brian? Or worse, what if Brian didn't even know she was using him? That night, Melissa came home, acting like nothing happened. She curled up on the couch beside me, kissed my neck, and asked what movie I wanted to watch. I looked at her like a stranger. Her hands, soft and familiar, had just hours ago typed instructions for someone to illegally access a client database. Who was she really? I said nothing. Just picked a movie, something generic, pretended I was tired. But inside, I was on fire, and I was going to follow this trail no matter where it led. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that only betrayal can sharpen. The apartment was silent, a hollow kind of silence that made every corner feel suspicious. Melissa hadn't come home last night. Her toothbrush was still dry, her pillow untouched. I didn't even check my phone, not out of restraint, but out of dread. But I had a plan now. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in the back corner of a local electronics store, talking in hushed tones to a guy named Victor, who specialized in discrete solutions. He never asked me why I wanted spyware on a phone. He just asked what kind of phone it was and handed me a flash drive with custom software. This'll mirror everything she does. Texts, calls, GPS, even live microphone access. Install it when she's charging the phone. 30 seconds tops. My hands trembled as I paid him in cash. I felt like I was stepping across a moral line, but the truth was, Melissa had already erased every line we ever drew together. That evening, when she finally walked through the door at 6:42 p.m., dressed in the same black coat I'd seen her wearing in the parking garage footage, I didn't say a word. I just greeted her like normal, kissed her cheek gently, and asked how her day was. She blinked at me, surprised by my calm. "Busy," she said. "Client dinner ran long." Of course it did. We ate dinner together, carbonara and silence. At 9 p.m., she fell asleep on the couch, wine glass half full beside her. I slipped her phone off the coffee table, unlocked it with her fingerprint while she dozed, and plugged in the flash drive. 30 seconds later, I had access to everything. And what I saw turned my stomach inside out. There were dozens of deleted messages, all recovered by the software. Names that matched no one I knew. But the most frequent sender was someone listed only as B. Their chats were encrypted, but not enough to stop Victor's software from pulling the plain text history, photos, hotel confirmations, voice memos. And then I saw it. A 13-second audio message. I hit play. Brian's voice. Smooth, arrogant, unmistakable. "Don't forget to wear the necklace I bought you. I want you glowing tonight. And remember, if he starts asking questions again, just remind him you're the only reason he still lives in this condo." I froze. Melissa had told him that. He thinks I'm some useless charity case she dragged along. I replayed the clip over and over, each time something cracked deeper inside me. This wasn't just infidelity, it was condescension, cruelty, manipulation. She was using me as camouflage. My loyalty had become her shield. And suddenly I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I began downloading everything to my hard drive. Texts, photos, voice recordings, even her location history, which showed a half-dozen visits to Brian Grant's private beach villa 2 hours up the coast. She had named the trips in her calendar as yoga retreat and client offsite. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up compiling a file, one Melissa would never imagine me capable of building. By sunrise, I had a digital folder so damning it could destroy her career, ruin Brian's image, and scorch every bridge she'd crossed to get there. But I wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. No. I wanted her to see me again, not as a ghost or a doormat, but as a man capable of fire. And for that, I'd need more than digital proof. I'd need to outplay them on their own stage. To take down a fortress, sometimes you don't need an army. You just need an invitation, and Melissa gave me one without knowing it. The following week, her firm threw their annual gala night, an exclusive masquerade event hosted at the Glass House Hotel in San Francisco. It was the kind of elite invite-only gathering where everyone wore masks more expensive than their actual outfits, and business deals were sealed between sips of champagne. Melissa had been gushing about it for weeks, calling it the most important social evening of the quarter. She'd even tried to casually suggest I not attend this year. "It's more for people in the inner circle," she had said with that tight smile. "You might feel out of place." Out of place. That phrase echoed in my skull like a dare. So I smiled, nodded, and told her I understood. Then I called Ryan Keller. Ryan wasn't just an old contact anymore. He was an analyst with connections in the federal contracting community. We'd met during a cybersecurity convention 2 years back. When I shared that Brian Grant's defense tech firm might be involved in illicit data manipulation and possibly corporate bribery, his interest piqued. "What you're describing," Ryan said during our coffee meetup, "could tie into 2 other investigations already on ice. But we need access, something that puts Brian at the center." I told him I had just the plan, the masquerade. The day of the gala, I dressed carefully. A tailored navy tuxedo, not the rental I used to wear, a silver mask shaped like a hawk's face, elegant, sharp, intimidating. Melissa barely noticed when I left that afternoon. She assumed I was going to a friend's birthday party. In truth, I had already booked a room at the Glass House under a different name. Using some basic IT sleight of hand and an e-ticket I intercepted from her inbox, I cloned the digital access to the event. By 8 p.m., I was walking through marble halls lit by golden chandeliers, the mask hiding not just my face, but my intent. I spotted Melissa immediately. She wore a crimson gown slit high enough to make every glance linger, and a delicate gold mask that matched the one she'd worn last year. Her laugh rang out in the room, too familiar, too performative. She wasn't with me anymore, but she was still playing a role. A few feet away stood Brian Grant, imposing in his black and silver ensemble, champagne in hand, arrogance radiating from every posture. I didn't approach them, not yet. Instead, I made my way toward the back where the executive suite was being used as a temporary VIP lounge. I wasn't there for small talk. I was there for a file. Ryan had tipped me off. Grant kept confidential microdrives on him during major networking events, tiny encrypted data sticks he plugged into his secured phone for transferring sensitive information directly to clients. Tonight, he'd be slipping one to a foreign investor who had been flagged by federal interest groups. I had 30 minutes to intercept it. Using the cloned credentials, I accessed the private hallway. My mask did the rest. No one questioned the hawk-faced man in a tux. I reached the VIP lounge and scanned the table. A leather briefcase sat near the sofa, unattended for just long enough. I moved quickly like I had during my brief stint in corporate infosec, swapping the real drive for a blank decoy, sliding a miniature GPS tracker into the inner seam of the case. By the time Brian returned, I was already across the room, sipping bourbon and pretending to flirt with a woman dressed as a Medusa. The next hour was electric tension. I watched from the shadows, feeling the full weight of years spent being invisible. I watched Melissa touch Brian's arm, lean in too closely, laugh too loudly. I saw her act like the ambitious power player she always wanted to be, and I realized something with blinding clarity. She never wanted a partner. She wanted an accessory, someone to hold her coat while she climbed the tower. But tonight I was more than her past. At 10:13 p.m., the trade happened. Brian passed a handshake to a man in a bone-white mask. The flash of a drive was barely visible, and then I made my move. I stepped out of the shadows, right into Melissa's line of sight. Her smile froze, shattered, and she blinked in confusion. The mask threw her off for a second, but then I raised my glass. That slight tilt of my head was all it took. She knew. Her eyes widened with the horror of recognition. Her perfect world, the one she'd curated so carefully, began to crumble right there, in the middle of the most prestigious night of her career. And I hadn't even spoken a word yet. I didn't stay long after she saw me. I didn't need to. Her face, what little I could see of it beneath that golden mask, was cracked in a panic she could no longer hide. Her lips parted, then shut. Her hand, once so confident on Brian's arm, fell to her side like a dropped curtain. I turned, slow and deliberate, and walked out of the ballroom. Each step was thunder in her ears. Back in the hotel room, I yanked off the mask and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was calm, but my pulse was a riot. I'd done it. I had stood before her, not as the doormat she'd grown used to, but as a man with power. She didn't know how much I knew. Not yet. But she would. The next day, Melissa acted like nothing happened. She returned home from her client brunch smiling, humming like she hadn't just seen her husband crash her affair. I played along. "You look great today," I told her, pouring coffee like we weren't both acting. She laughed. "You're sweet." The gall of it. She didn't ask about the masquerade, didn't ask if I was there. But I saw her eyes linger a bit too long on my phone when it buzzed. Her poker face was cracking. That night, I launched Phase 2. From my laptop, I sent an anonymous email to Brian Grant, S corporate inbox, one with a teaser screenshot of a photo. Him and Melissa at the beach villa. She was in a bikini. He was shirtless, time-stamped, geo-tagged, unmistakable. Subject: the woman behind the mask isn't who you think she is. No threats, no demands, just proof. Then I hit send. 2 hours later, Melissa's phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I watched it on my spyware feed in real time. Brian G. "What the hell is this?" "You told me you deleted everything." "Who the f*** has these?" She replied quickly. Melissa: "I don't know. I swear. I didn't send anything." Maybe someone hacked into the villa system? Lies spun faster than breath. Brian didn't buy it. He went silent for 40 minutes. Then came the real message. Brian G. "This better not blow back on me. You know what I have on you." There it was, the leverage, the implicit threat. So Brian had something too, something she didn't want getting out. What did he mean? What could he possibly be holding over her? I dug deeper. I searched Melissa S. old laptop, the one she'd stashed in the closet and hadn't touched since upgrading. It took hours to break her outdated password encryption, but eventually I was in. Inside a hidden folder labeled Archive, I found contracts, designs, payment records, all connected to an early prototype of an interface for Uninet's AI surveillance system. Wait, Melissa wasn't just Brian's lover. She helped design the UI shell used in beta testing. She wasn't some clueless mistress. She was a collaborator, and it got worse. One payment document was signed off not by Uninet, but by a shell company tied to foreign cybersecurity research. Her name, Melissa Walker, was listed under vendor. She sold proprietary code, or at least helped transfer it. The room spun. No wonder Brian had leverage. Melissa had committed a federal crime. She got home around 9 p.m. that night. I was already in bed, lights off. I listened as she walked into the kitchen, poured herself wine, and scrolled through her phone. I could hear her breathing speed up, her fingers tapping fast, nervous. Then she came into the bedroom. "Hey," she whispered. I said nothing. She sat beside me, laying a hand on my shoulder like a stranger begging for normal. "Rough day?" she asked, voice too light. I turned my head slightly, not enough to meet her gaze, just enough to let the silence sting. "You know," I said finally, "I've been thinking maybe we should take a trip." "A trip?" She blinked. "Somewhere quiet, where we can talk, really talk." Something in her shifted. Her posture straightened, her fingers stiffened. She smiled, but it was brittle. "Sure," she said, "I think that would be good." And in that moment I saw it, just a flicker, but it was there. Fear. The woman behind the mask was cracking, and I wasn't finished with her yet. We left on a Thursday. Melissa packed light, a change of clothes, her yoga mat, a silk robe, and a book she never intended to read. She asked no questions about the cabin I chose. She didn't ask why I'd suddenly wanted to reconnect. I could tell she didn't believe me, but she played along. I'd booked a remote lakeside Airbnb 2 hours north of the city, a quiet glass-walled house nestled against pine trees and fog, the kind of place you go to escape, or to end things. On the way there, she talked about work. The tension in her voice was like a violin string stretched too tight. "I think Brian's been acting weird lately," she said carefully. "He's paranoid." I gave her nothing. She kept fishing. "He thinks someone's leaking things to competitors. Can you believe that?" I didn't blink. "Sounds serious." Silence swallowed us again. At the cabin, I played the role. Doting husband, glass of wine in hand, cooking dinner while she sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she wasn't tea unraveling inside. She didn't know I'd removed the internet router. She didn't know there was no cell signal for miles. She didn't know that in my bag were printed copies of every piece of evidence, photos, messages, payment records, audio clips. I wanted her isolated. I wanted her to feel, for once, what it was like to be at someone else's mercy, and I wanted to see what she'd do when the mask was gone. We had dinner by candlelight. It would have been romantic if not for the lies curdling between us like spoiled wine. She asked, "Why this place?" I smiled. "I thought we needed to be somewhere. Honest." That word landed hard. Her eyes twitched. Later, by the fire, she poured another glass of red and finally said it. "You were at the gala." I didn't deny it. "You just stood there. Why?" I sipped my drink. "Because sometimes silence is louder than screaming." She laughed, sharp and cold. "You think you're clever now, is that it?" "No," I said. "I think I've just stopped pretending." She looked away. I waited. Then I pulled a manila envelope from the bag at my feet and slid it across the coffee table toward her. She stared at it like it was a bomb. "What's this?" she asked. "Start with page 3, I said. She did. I watched her face as it shifted. Confusion, dread, recognition, collapse. The photo of her and Brian on the beach, the message transcripts, the financial contract signed under the shell company. Everything. She didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes. Then she whispered, "How long have you known?" "Long enough to stop loving the woman you used to be." That hit harder than anything else. Her lips trembled. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said, almost to herself. I leaned in. "But you let it. You nurtured it. You watched me rot in that apartment while you built a kingdom of lies." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand," she choked. "Brian, He said I could change everything. He said I was brilliant." "And you believed him?" She nodded, broken. I needed to believe someone. The fire cracked, the wine bottle was empty. The silence was sacred. I stood, walked over to the windows, stared out at the lake. "You know," I said, "I'm not here to forgive you or to hurt you. I'm here to bury what's left." She didn't answer. I turned back. Her hands were trembling over the documents. "You'll ruin me if you release these," she said. "Probably," I replied. "But maybe you deserve to be ruined, not for what you did to me, but for what you did to yourself." She didn't cry. Not really. She just stared at the envelope like it had swallowed her whole. And that was when I realized. She had no plan, no backup, no escape. All her power had been borrowed. And now, the debt was due. The morning after our cabin confrontation, Melissa sat in silence. Her usual fire was gone, replaced by something hollow. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. Just stared into her untouched coffee like it might offer an escape route. I didn't push her. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the most merciless confession. We packed our things around noon and drove back to the city. The entire ride, Melissa barely spoke, only asked once if I intended to tell anyone. I answered honestly. "I haven't decided yet." Her fingers clenched. That was the first sign of fear. But it wasn't me she had to worry about. It was Brian. Because that morning, before we left the cabin, I sent the full dossier to Ryan Keller. Encrypted, time-stamped, legally annotated. Ryan responded almost immediately. "This is bigger than we thought," he said. "We're handing this over to a federal contact this week. But Ethan, Brian Grant won't go down without trying to take someone with him." I knew that, but I also knew how the game was played. 2 days later, the first move came, not from the feds, but from Brian's PR team. An article appeared online, planted on one of those corporate image-polishing blogs, exposing the double agent, how a trusted consultant betrayed Uninet's internal firewall. The double agent was clearly Melissa. They painted her as a disgruntled contractor who tried to sabotage the project for profit, a rogue asset with international ties. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so calculated. Melissa's phone rang non-stop that day. Her job terminated. Her LinkedIn flooded with questions. Her mother furious and demanding answers. She stormed into my apartment that night, trembling. "You did this," she hissed. "No," I said coolly. "You did this the moment you handed Brian my life." She backed away like I'd slapped her. "You don't understand," she snapped. "This isn't just a scandal. I could go to prison." "You should have thought about that before turning your marriage into collateral." That night I called Simon Reyes. Simon wasn't just a journalist. He was a quiet legend in the tech investigative space. Ex-NSA analyst turned whistleblower, now a rogue reporter who hunted tech fraud like a wolf. I didn't need money, I needed exposure. When Simon heard the story, heard about the spyware, the secret project, the data trade, he went silent for 10 full seconds. Then he said, "Send me everything." I did. By the end of the next day, he had enough to move forward. And the countdown began. Melissa, now blackballed and jobless, tried desperately to clean up the wreckage. She emailed Brian, begged him to release a statement clarifying she was not involved in espionage. He never replied. She tried to sell her jewelry, reach out to old mentors, even file for a new consultancy license. None of it worked. Her name was radioactive, and she knew it. The story dropped a week later, front page of The Signal, how a defense tech giant used sex, lies, and shell companies to move code across borders. Melissa wasn't named explicitly, but the timeline and descriptions made it unmistakable. Brian Grant, meanwhile, was listed as a high-level executive under pending federal scrutiny. His name would later appear in 4 separate subpoenas. Melissa called me that night. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was quiet, defeated. "I never meant to become this person. I just wanted to matter. And now I'm nothing." I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, because there was nothing left to say. The last time I saw her, she was at a coffee shop in San Mateo, sitting alone with a folder in her lap and tears dried on her cheeks. She didn't see me walk by, and I didn't stop. Some ghosts are better left walking. 6 months had passed since the story broke. The headlines moved on. The world turned. But for me, the silence after the storm was louder than the chaos itself. I had returned to my minimalist apartment overlooking the bay. Same couch, same teapot, same muted walls. But nothing about me was the same. My days were quiet, focused. I started consulting again, but on my own terms. I no longer pitched to flashy venture capitalists or tech overlords. Instead, I worked with small firms, startups that actually believed in ethics. I taught them how to build systems that didn't exploit users, how to protect data like it was a sacred contract. Ironically, my inbox was never fuller. People wanted truth now. Integrity had become a rare commodity. And when word got out about my role in exposing Uninet's internal scandal, I wasn't blacklisted. I was hunted by those who still believed. I declined interviews, declined fame, but not purpose. Melissa, as far as I knew, moved out of California. There were whispers she'd taken a job abroad, something unrelated to tech. She was gone from the ecosystem. A ghost memory in a system that no longer welcomed her. I didn't check up on her, not out of malice, just closure. We weren't enemies. We weren't lovers. We were just two stories that collided too hard and shattered at the seams. Sometimes when I walked through Union Square and saw couples hand in hand, I'd wonder what it would have been like if she had chosen love over ambition, if she'd said no to Brian, if she'd come to me that night instead of meeting him at the Hyatt rooftop. But that path was fiction, and I was done with fiction. What really mattered now was the man I became, the man who learned to listen before trusting, the man who learned that love without respect is a trap, the man who stopped apologizing for seeing through illusions. One evening, I stood by the window as fog rolled over the Bay Bridge, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. Not because I'd won, but because I didn't become what they tried to turn me into. I didn't retaliate with hate. I didn't manipulate in return. I let the truth speak. And that, in the end, was louder than any revenge. Months later, Simon Reyes' article was nominated for a National Journalism Award. He called to thank me, his voice warm. "You did the right thing, Ethan," he said. "Most people wouldn't." I smiled. "I didn't do it to be good," I said. "I did it because I couldn't live with being a coward. Now I live in a rhythm of purpose. I take morning walks, I journal, I build small things. Sometimes I teach local community college classes on ethical coding. Once a month I meet with a veterans group, people like me who have survived betrayals and rebuilt themselves. We don't talk about pain much. We talk about rebuilding, about clarity, about choosing the hard path and finding our backbone along the way. It's not flashy, it's not viral, but it's real. And sometimes real is enough, especially when you've lived through the opposite.